Good day, everyone. This is Charles with the Exodus Logistics Learning Center, America's #1 dispatcher and freight broker training. Today is Friday the 13th. This is our Friday edition of our freight broker trainings. This is the second week of the month of February. So tonight we're going to cover a little bit about um, I'm going to ask the question first. What do you guys think? And I'll get your perspective. What are the two biggest challenges that a freight broker face? What do you think in your opinion? And I got some people coming in, so I'm gonna break it down a little bit because I want to share my screen.
I would say getting customers.
Okay, okay.
Would say it's the greatest World Series ever.
And your second, what do you think? So I'm going to share a screen with something that I looked up on the AI technology, Chat GPT and other, and what I put in as a parameter and then what it spit out. And I'm going to share that with the class and maybe even the YouTube channel as well in the conversation here. So let me share that and let me know when you see the screen. Can you guys see the screen? Yes, no, maybe. Yep.
I can.
Okay. So I put in, I'm a freight broker. I need assistance and ways to overcome my biggest challenges right now, which are getting shippers on the phone and converting interest into loads. Please advise. Does that sound like it's pretty reasonable? Two biggest challenges, getting the shippers on the phone and converting interest into loads, right? Into freight, into cargo. What do you guys think? Is that a good starting place?
I think so.
Getting, because in order to get to be a freight broker, you're gonna have to get a shipper. Okay. And then once you get a shipper, okay, once they're interested, you're gonna have to get some loads, right? So, and it catered it to my area. I'm in Hampton Roads, Virginia. So if you see Hampton Roads, that's my location. The seven cities, Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Suffolk, Newport News, Hampton. Okay. We call it the seven cities, called them Hampton Roads. It's the southeastern portion of Virginia by the Atlantic Ocean. So let's fix both of these troubles, getting shippers on the phone and turning interest into loads, into actual loads, right? So we'll fix it with strategy and not motivation. So I'm gonna go through. It's a 6 page, and I'm gonna ask for input and see how you guys can apply this to your brokerage, whether you already have one or you're in the process of building one, whether you're in either position, whether you're just getting started with a brokerage, trying to get one started, or whether you already have one and haven't reached these goals yet, this applies to you. You need to get shippers on the phone and you need to actually turn the interest of the shipper into actual loads. Okay. So, and then it says, since you're in the Hampton Roads, uh, with access to freight tied to the Port of Virginia, that's where I'm at. I'm near the Port of Virginia. You already have a positioning edge. So wherever your area is, when you put a request into the technology, AI technology like Chat GPT, it'll see where you're located and then see what's available in your area, right? So now we need to sharpen the execution. So number one, the first problem one, can't get shippers on the phone. Sound like a problem? Can't get the shippers on the phone. So this is usually a timing strategy and messaging issue. Okay. So as I'm talking to you, I'm also editing, if I say that right, editing, whatever, uh, the the document. Okay. So, so fix one, right? Here's fix one. Call at the right time. When is a good time to call shippers, right? So it says here, most brokers call shippers between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. in whatever time zone you're in, right? Worst time. Why is that the worst time? Let's understand why it's the worst time and just saying it's the worst time. But between 10 and 2, it's the worst time to call. Why is that the worst time? Think about that for a minute. What are shippers doing between the hours of 10 and 2? They're trying to move their freight. They're putting out fires. They're trying to, maybe a truck fell through and they're trying to find another truck or find another broker to get the problem resolved. Those are busy times during the day between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. They probably won't take a phone call. Even if they do, they're very standoffish or too busy to for you to convince them or get their attention because their attention is elsewhere. They're putting out fires, they're trying to solve problems. Does anybody disagree with that? No? So instead, it says try between 7:30 a.m. and 9, whatever time zone they're in, Eastern, Central, Mountain, or Pacific for their companies that they're based in, because that's before meetings get started. And then try between 4 and 5:30. Decision makers are clearing their desks, so they're getting ready to be done, right? But between 10 and 2 is considered the worst time. Anybody have any input to that before I move on? And that's one fix in trying to get a shipper on the phone. I can't get shippers on the phone. Well, you may be calling them at the wrong time, right? So change your time points and see if there's a difference that'll happen, right? Change your time points. And who knows, you may catch them between those times, but you may not. Okay. So shipping managers start early. So be there, right? Shipping managers start early. They have to. They have, especially if they manage a DC, a large distribution center or a warehouse that's at least 50,000 square feet or more, or maybe 25,000 square feet or more. If you're a shipping manager, that means you have so many bay doors. That means you have so many LTL companies coming in, so many FTL companies coming in, maybe so many containers, maybe so many drop trailers. You have to oversee that, right? So they're coming in early. Okay. So that's something to consider, right? Try to get down the pattern of calling them at the right time. So the timing could be a good starting point in trying to get a shipper on the phone. Okay. Just something to think about. These are suggestions, right? And if you try them then and they work, then they are things that you can use now at this point, right? Fix number two, as far as I can't get shippers on the phone, right? And this may be a challenge. Stop sounding like a broker. Well, what the heck does a broker sound like? Says everyone, right? Stop sounding like a broker, or I should say a broken record, right? So if your opener sounds like this, hi, we are a full service freight brokerage. They're gone. Either hang up or you've lost interest, right? Hey, we're a full service freight brokerage, right? Okay. Instead, it says, say, hi, whoever, just James or whoever, uh, Charles, let's say I'm the shipper, right? Hey, Charles, quick question. If one of your carriers falls through on a Port of Virginia container. Now, the reason why we're doing Port of Virginia because the AI technology realized that I was in an area where there's port work. I'm at a Port of Virginia. So if one of your containers, if one of your carriers, let's say in this case, since it's doing the Port of Virginia, if one of your drayage carriers, right, because drayage carriers pick up and deliver containers from the ports to destinations, to receivers, distribution centers, last mile retail stores, whatever, right? If one of your carriers falls through on a Port of Virginia container, how quickly can you recover? That's a good question to ask a shipper, right? Instead of saying we're a full service broker, challenge them. Hey, how quickly can you recover if one of your carriers fall through on a Port of Virginia container, on a Port of Virginia container, whether it's a 20-foot container, 40 feet mix, both, whatever, right? So open it with a question. Now they're interesting. You sound interesting now instead of sounding like a broker, an ordinary broker. You have curiosity and it's an introduction. Does everybody understand that? Any questions there? You want to kind of flip the script a little bit, right? Pique their interest, but still maintaining who you are. Any questions there? Stop sounding like a broker. You guys understand with that, right? So let's say, for example, Terry is in Indiana. So hey Terry, quick question. Let's say you're a shipper, right? If one of your carriers falls through on a shipment, on one of your dry van shipments or your flatbed shipments, well, not flatbed necessarily in the Midwest, but reefer or dry van. So you got also, that's another thing you want to be familiar with too. When you call shippers, you want to understand what equipment type their commodities are going to be moved on or shipped with, right? Dry van, flatbeds, or reefer. And you got to learn that, you got to be on top of that when you call them. You don't want to sound uneducated, right? So hey Terry, a quick question. If one of your carriers falls through on a dry van truckload, how quickly can you recover? And what you're asking them is how soon can you find another carrier to grab that load and still get it picked up on time and delivered on time to your customer to satisfy your customer. That's what you, the broker, is asking that customer, that potential customer that you're trying to get, right? And see what they say and just shut up. Ask the question, shut up, or stop talking. Be quiet. Shut up is too harsh of an expression. Be quiet. Don't say anything. Hear what they got to say. And then take what they say and feed off of that and leverage that to continue on in the conversation. Now you have a conversation. Now you have dialogue, right? But your opening monologue should be one of curiosity, right? Hey, if one of your carriers falls through or what happens if you lose a carrier or a carrier drops a load? How quickly can you recover and get another load out to your customer in that challenging lane or whatever, right? So that's fix number two on how to get a shipper on the phone. Once you get them on the phone, how to keep them on the phone. Ask that type of question. Don't sound like a broker, right? Fix three, the hyper target instead of mass dialing. So basically, this is saying you want to specifically target your specific area, right? Instead of going after any manufacturer, you want to try to create a niche, right? You may be in an area where there's lumber importers or steel distributors. Steel is pretty much everywhere. A popular steel company is you probably heard of it. I don't know, Nucor. They have offices all over the country. I forget where their corporate headquarters are located, but yeah. Um, Food importers, construction material suppliers, military suppliers, and again, this is in Hampton Roads. This is my area. That's why it's talking about that. But your area may have other types of commodities shippers or manufacturers or distributors, right? You would just have to look that up in your area. but the concepts are universal. You'll say the same type of verbiage to the potential customer in order to pique the interest. So instead of any manufacturer, when you say we specialize in steel imports coming out of the Port of Virginia, you sound different. We specialize in steel, we specialize in food imports, or we specialize in construction supplies coming out of uh, Hammond, Indiana, or Naptown, or we handle lumber coming out of St. Louis, right? Or whatever the commodities coming out of the area that you. The point is you specialize in those things, so it makes you sound different, right? Instead of being generic and general, you want to be different and specific, right? So instead of saying any manufacturer, try saying these types of manufacturers: importers, distributors, exporters, suppliers. So these are key words: importers, distributors, suppliers. Those are key shipping words because importers, freight is imported to their facility and then exported or outbound to their last mile customers. Distributors, they get their products from wholesalers, from the manufacturers to the wholesalers and to the distributors, and then to the retail, right? Raw materials, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, retailers, right? And then suppliers. Retailers, another word for suppliers could be retailers. They supply goods, right? So, any questions here so far?
Um, I did have a quick question.
Yes.
So because obviously I will be in the beginning stage of talking to some of these shippers, I have no experience, no history of working in any of these areas. So when I'm like kind of zoning in a particular shipper or distributor, um, what's the approach that I'm coming if they're like, well, you know, what's your history? What have you done? And I'm like brand new. Like there might be my first shipper that I've ever called.
Right. So even so, every new broker who's never been in the industry, it's their first experience. They don't know the commodity at the that the shipper either or the manufacturer has made their finished products to be shipped out. You don't have to educate yourself about their product. You just have to provide an ability to pick it up and transport it to their customer. You see, that's the difference. Now you have to understand their problem lanes, where they're having issues from when things fall through, when carriers fall through, you have to be the backup plan. That's where you come in at. You don't have to know their workflow and their whole company verbatim, but you have to understand the company, what they do, what lanes they move in, and then if there's anything that falls through, can we be a backup option for you? What happens when a carrier falls through? How quickly can you recover? Or who do you call on? And when those carriers fall through, can we be another option for you? Let us do a test run. Let us try us out and see how you like our services. And if so, we see we can work together for some more lanes or some more shipments. But yeah, you don't have to be that deep in knowing the company specifically, but what you do have to have, you have to understand your role as a freight broker. You're the person who arranges for the transport of freight. So you're doing that now by attempting to get a shipper and get them interested and get some loads from that shipper, and then hire a motor carrier and authorize authority motor carrier to transport that newly acquired shipper's freight. That's your job as a freight broker. Okay.
Mm, okay.
That's as deep as it gets. Now, over time, as you work with either the same shipper or multiple shippers, you're going to learn lingo and jargon that's going to make you sound even more educated. That's just a bone. That's just icing on the cake. That's all, right? But the premise is every broker needs to understand what their responsibility is as a freight broker. Okay. what you specifically are hired to do. You are hired to solve a problem, right? Otherwise, the shipper would not have hired you. Because some shippers work directly with trucking companies, right? They'll tender loads to trucking companies. Now, you have a lot of trucking companies that don't agree with the rates of those tenders, so they'll do what's called tender rejections. They'll reject that tender. And the shipper will say, well, okay, well, we'll just hire a broker to deal with that. We won't have to deal with the trucks. We'll tender it to the broker and let the broker have the responsibility of dealing with the trucking companies. And that's what you do as a broker, right? So the same tender amount, the carrier rejected it. Now they put themselves in a precarious situation because it's going to be less now. If they were smart, they would have took the shipment from the shipper directly, right? Because the tender amounts would have been higher because now you got a broker involved. How are you going to get paid? You have to chunk into that tender amount. You have to make your margin or your profit margin off that tender and then sell it to the carrier, right? So,
Got it.
so if the trucking company was smart, they would have agreed and took the tender rate directly from the customer. But most carriers, well, I can't say most carriers, but a lot of carriers uh, probably don't think on those lines, right? They're satisfied working with brokers and getting chopped down rates and all this other stuff. So, okay.
Wow, sounds good. Appreciate that.
Yep. Fix number 4 in you can't get shippers on the phone. This is called the multi-touch strategy. So it says stop relying just on calls, which is, yeah. So don't put all your eggs in one basket, basically. There's different methods of trying to get to the shippers. Cold calling is just one of the methods, but don't limit yourself with just the cold calls. Mix it up, right? You may get burnt out by doing this over and over and over again. Don't get burnt out. So do this. Day 1, call. Day 2, email. Day 4, you skip the day, connect on LinkedIn with the shipper. Day 7, call back, circle back. Then day 10, a follow-up email. So kind of mix it up, right? Most brokers quit after the first attempt. Shippers respond around touch 6 to 8. So if you're constantly engaging, call, email, LinkedIn connection. If a shipper connects with you on LinkedIn, that means that they've read the request. You know how for those of you who are familiar with LinkedIn, when you go and make a request to connect with somebody, it allows you to add a little note to that before you send. Are you guys familiar with that on LinkedIn? When you go to connect, it says add a note and then you send it. In that note, you can type in a little message, who you are, what you do, and things like that. If a shipper connects with you from LinkedIn, that means they've read that note and something piqued their interest for them to decide to hit connect. That is a warm lead, right? That's a warm lead. Now you have their interest. So now once they connect with you, follow up through LinkedIn. Start a conversation on LinkedIn. Hey, here's my contact information. If you have time to talk, we can talk. Otherwise, we can just continue here and you can just get into it. That way, that removes that fear of you talking on the phone. If they connect with you on LinkedIn, just communicate via LinkedIn and to the point where you guys are comfortable enough to speak on the phone, right? So, multi-touch strategy, just a strategy, right? That's problem 1. So, in the beginning of this Zoom tonight, we said, what are the 2 biggest problems for a freight broker? The first one is getting shippers on the phone, and the second problem is getting interest from that shipper to turn into loads, right? So let's go back up to the top and show you that. 2 biggest problems, getting shippers on the phone and turning interest into loads. Because you can get a shipper on the phone, that's fine, and interested, but how does that convert into you moving freight and getting shipments or getting loads, cargo, so on and so forth, right? So we addressed problem 1, different strategies. Problem 2, I get interest from the shippers, but no loads, right? So How many of you have been in this position? Whether you're on this Zoom tonight or you're listening in the audience and on the YouTube channel that this is going to be on. How many of you are in that position where you're good on the calling the shippers and breaking the ice there, getting past the gatekeeper and all that other nonsense? You get interest, but it stops there. You can't get them to tender you freight. You can't get any loads, right? So this is a positioning and follow-up issue, right? In other words, you got the interest, but you got to stay at it. You got to stay at it, right? So you're halfway there. You got the shipper, you got interest, you're halfway there. You haven't gotten to the full, give me a tender load, let me try a load, things like that. So let's diagnose why loads aren't coming. Okay. Mistake number one. You're asking, do you have freight? Of course they have freight. They're a shipper. That's an obvious question, right? And I don't want to sound like I'm crazy, but I'm just saying, of course they have freight. You're calling them, right? So that makes you sound what? Optional. Okay. So instead ask, what lanes are hardest for you to cover right now? Okay. What lanes are hardest for you to cover right now? That's you, the broker, asking the potential customer. What lanes are hardest for you to cover now? Or where do you experience the most disruptions? What do they mean by disruptions? And by the way, now you're solving and not selling. You're attempting to solve because you're asking them problem questions. But what do they mean? Where do you experience the most disruptions? What do they mean by disruptions? Or what could be a meaning of disruptions? Anyone? What do they mean? No one has an answer to that? Disruptions?
Disruptions could be probably, hey, where do you experience like either fallouts, or some of the carriers might be, flaking out, or not coming through with the deliveries, or anything like that for of that sort.
Very good, Jose. So the generalized definition of a disruption is anything that interrupts the movement of that shipment from pickup to delivery. Anything that stops, delays, or halts that process is called a disruption. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Agree. That's a disruption from the smallest thing to the largest thing. In most cases, most disruptions involve the carrier. In most cases, because the carrier is the one who has the shipper's freight on their trailer, transporting it to the receiver. So, of course, most of the disruptions are going to be with the carrier. Some disruptions could be with the paperwork. The BOL may not be right. When they get to the shipping location or when they get to the receiver, it could have gotten rejected, right? Or it could be a host of things. Or a disruption could be if the carrier is stopped by DOT on the road, level 1, 2, 3, or whatever inspection, they get shut down. Who steps in to help, right? What happens there? Someone has to come out if the carrier agrees, because the carrier, they're an owner operator. They own and operate that truck and trailer, right? It's their trailer. They will have to agree to what's called a trailer interchange for another carrier, a power only carrier perhaps, to come out there and hitch to the previous carrier's trailer and finish that segment or that line haul to the last mile destination, right? They'll pick it up. Sometimes they'll do a transload. They'll back up to each other's tail, touch each other, and then just move freight from one tail of the trailer to the other tail. That's called a transload, right? Now that's on the road transload. Most transloads are at warehouses. You dock one truck in one, let's say dock one and then dock two, and you just take freight off of this truck and move it over to the other truck. That's a transload. You're transferring freight from one trailer to another trailer. That's called a transload. Okay. Or you go from one dock here across the warehouse to another dock over there. So a shipping side to that's called cross docking. Okay. Did you guys know this? You got transloads and you have cross docks. Okay. But in any case, if there is an interruption in the process of the successful completion of a shipment, that is a disruption. Okay. You guys getting this? This is good information?
Yeah, real good information.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Okay, next, mistake number 2 in the I get interest but no loads. Mistake number 2, no urgency created. What does that mean, right? Let's get it. Let's break that down. If they say, the shipper, let's say if they, and I'm going to be more specific, send me your information. Most shippers will do that. They're probably trying to get rid of you because they'll put it in what's called, who's familiar with file 13? What is file 13? You
The
guys,
trash.
the trash. That's file 13. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in file 13. Go ahead and send it to my file account, file 13. Send me your information. And then you say, okay, you lost. Is that it? Right? You say, okay. They say, send me your information. You say, okay. Right? Send me your information. You say, okay. Instead, say, okay, absolutely. Just so I tailored it correctly, what's your most common outbound lane? So now you're asking them a question. What is your most common outbound lane? Now they're engaged because now they have to answer that question. Well, they don't necessarily have to answer it, but you're at least engaged. And what does it mean by an outbound lane? Right? So I know I'm saying terms, and so I want to make sure that everyone follows me when I say it, right? An outbound lane is since you're dealing with a shipper, they are moving freight outbound. They're shipping it to their customer, which is the receiver, the consignee. The shippers are the consignors, right? And I'll put that here, shipper slash consignor. That's their legal title, right? And so you can see it. And the receivers are the consignee. It's spelled the same, except for the last 2 letters you put instead of OR is EE, consignee or consignee. Depends on how you pronounce it, right? So, so absolutely. Just so I tailor it correctly, that's you talking to the shipper now. What's your most common outbound lane? In other words, where do you ship freight? Which directions do you ship freight in the most? Where are your trucks heading to the most? Where are your goods heading to the most? You may not have trucks. So unless you're customer routed, unless you have your consignee customers have trucks, they come get it. But we're not talking about that right now. So outbound lanes are leaving their facility, going to their customer's facility. And they'll tell you if you broke the ice correctly and you got warm interest, they'll tell you, yeah, we're outbound from Naptown, Indianapolis. We'll go down to the Atlanta market. Sometimes we'll go over to the St. Louis market from Indianapolis to the Detroit, Michigan market, and then we'll hit the Northeast, Indianapolis market outbound, Northeast bound to Syracuse and Buffalo. And you like, what the heck did he just say? Right? But think about it. What do I mean? I say, okay, we're outbound from Indianapolis. We have about 5 or 6 outbound lanes. Let me see if you guys can convert this for me. We have about 5 or 6 outbound lanes. Indianapolis to, and they might even give you zip codes. We have Terry, what's Indianapolis zip code? What's the zip code in Indianapolis? 4 something, right? What's the zip code in Indianapolis? I could easily look it up on the Google, but I figure you just tell me what a zip code is in Indianapolis. You're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
46250.
46
46250.
46250. So we're outbound from 46250 to 48210. We're outbound 46520 to 23321. We're outbound 46250 to 10059. So they're giving you zip to zip. Now, as a broker, you say, okay, but you'll need to go look up what cities those zip codes are. It's good to get zip to zip because you're getting the exact miles. That's fine, but you still want to convert it to something that you understand, right? And remember the zone thing that we talked about. You could tell where a location is by the zone it's in. So I know Indianapolis is in zone 4 because the zip code starts with a 4. I'm in zone 2 because my zip code starts with a zone 2. The Northeast is in zone 1 or zone 0 because their zip codes start with 0 and 1. Texas is in zone 7, 77057. Houston and Dallas, they all start with 7s. Did you guys know this? Right? The zones of the country and the cities thereof is based off of their zip codes. When the history of the postal service, that's how mail is routed. Were you guys aware of that? I think some of you were or are. So that's a little history lesson there. But yeah, that's the outbound lane. We're going outbound from Indianapolis. We have a Northeast facility over in upstate New York, Buffalo, and Syracuse. We go down to the tip of the Southeast in Norfolk, Virginia. Then we go down to Atlanta market, maybe down to Miami, and then over to Houston. Our base of operations coming out of 46250 Indianapolis, going in those different lanes. Our most challenging lane is the Northeast. Those two lanes going to the Northeast, to 46250 to Buffalo and Syracuse, because it's challenging getting carriers to come out of there, right? Because there's not much that we can provide for them. We just go to our facilities. There's nothing that they have outbound coming out of those locations. This is the shipper talking to you, the broker now, right? And you listening to the conversation, right? But you're engaging, okay?
So what would be like the response to something like that? Like, okay, so now they told you what, you know, what's their most common outbound lane, and they're giving you all this information, and you're just like, okay,
Great,
so what?
great. You'll say, great. That's what we specialize in. Give us an
Okay,
opportunity, and at least to be I'm sure you already have carriers and brokers that you're already working with, Mr. Shipper, but give us an opportunity whenever there's a disruption in the movement of your freight or one of your carriers fall through. Let us be a backup option for you. Just keep us in mind. We can send you our information, and whenever there comes a time that you may need a backup, give us a call, and we'll see if we can help you.
so you're basically kind of setting yourself to be a second option at that moment. You're not kind of more overdoing it and be like, hey, why go with them? Go with us. More like, hey,
You would
in case
never do
something
it that way,
happens,
right?
yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. You got it. Exactly. Yeah, you never, the one thing you don't want to do is talk negatively about any competitor, right? That's not your purpose. Your purpose is to try to win the customer, right?
Hmm.
Now, you don't want to win the customer maliciously by downplaying or negatively speaking about other people, right? Because that's bad karma. You don't want that coming on you, right? You just let them know what you can do. Hey, whenever something falls through, I know you deal with a lot of other brokers and carriers, but when there's issues where a broker disappointed or there was any disruptions in your lanes, or you need a backup for a carrier that may have a truck broke down or there's issues there, give us a call. We'll see if we can help you. Or give us a call. We will help you. Sound more assertive and positive. Don't sound like we'll see if we can help you. Yeah, that sounds a little bit less. Sounds like
Right.
domicile, a little domicile, right? You want to be assertive, not aggressive, but assertive, right? Yeah, we'll give us a call. We'll be able to help you, and be positive. Your tone, your pitch, how you speak, right? Talk like you've done it before, even though you may never have done it before. They don't know that. You're on the phone with them. They don't see you, right? They don't know any of that. But the way you speaks volumes, right?
And, and the shippers are also able to look up your authority, just like we are the carriers.
Of course they are. They know all of that. Yeah, shippers have access to TMS systems, load boards. The shippers are in the transportation industry. They are the high upper echelon of the transportation industry. They are up there in the supply chain. We are here, brokers and carriers and dispatchers and things like that. Yes. So to answer your question, yes, they are able to look up information and things like that. That's
Mm.
correct.
So they see like, hey, this guy just got his authority, or he's been having it for however long.
Right. But so I'm glad you made that point. So every new brokerage or every brokerage that have experience now, like the TQLs, the CH Robinsons, um, all the big so-called big boys, at some point they started from nothing in order to get to where they are now, right? Someone gave them a chance to prove themselves, and then over time they just kept proving and proving and proving and growing and scaling and growing and scaling. You're here. You're not there yet, but you're here. So if you establish your foundation doing it the right way here, when you grow and scale, keep that same theme and you'll end up just like the same big boys. Now don't be as don't get the reputation of them because these days they're not very good, but at any rate, you get the point though, right? You want everybody gotten their shot. Somebody gave someone a shot at the beginning, and then that person proved themselves and earned the business of the customer over time, right? And
Yeah, that
that's
makes sense.
right. So, um, mistake number three, you're not asking for the trial load. And we just mentioned that. Give us an opportunity and we'll prove to you that we can get it done. So you must say, would you be open to testing us on one load this week just to see how we perform? So ask them if they'll be willing to give you an opportunity to test you on a load. And they'll probably give you either a small load or their worst lane to see how you perform. That's usually how they do it to test you. So it's no trial. So no trial equals no trust build. They want to try you to try to build trust. Okay. Let me change the color of this to green so it sticks out like the others. Uh, there. So now, those are the mistakes. Those are the I get interest but no loads, right? Those are all the different mistakes, what you're doing and how you overcome them, do something. Now, how to convert interest into loads. Well, this may be interesting. This is what you want. You want to convert the interest of the customer that you got from doing your phone call and what you said on the phone into loads. How else are you going to get paid? You're a freight broker. You're someone who arranges for transportation, right? So, five-step conversion framework, right? So it's something universal. It's a framework. So, identify one specific lane. And you'll know that by doing your homework. Wherever you decide to create a niche for yourself in your specific location or anywhere in the country. It doesn't necessarily have to be where you live. It's helpful to start finding shippers where you live because you can physically make yourself available right in their face, in their backyard, right? That makes you look more credible because, hey, I'm a freight broker. I'm literally here. If you have any questions, I'm physically here too, not just on the phone, right? I can get to you better, right? And I can make sure carriers are doing their thing. Okay. Excuse me. So identify one specific lane. So instead of any freight, like do you have any freight to move or whatever, right? Any freight, you want to get specific areas, right? In your area. Now this is targeting my area because I did the search for the AI technology in my area, obviously, and you'll do the same thing in yours. But let's say Norfolk, which is where I'm at, to Atlanta, or let's say Indianapolis, where Terry's at, or St. Louis, where LaDonna's at, right? To Jacksonville or whatever, right? Or that's specific city to specific city, specific state to specific state, VA to Texas, or Indianapolis to Florida, or St. Louis to Texas, or whatever, right? Or port container to local warehouse. Now, if you live in a port city like me, I got Los Angeles, Long Beach, the Jersey, New York ports, the Baltimore ports, the Wilmington, North Carolina ports, the Savannahs, the Jacksonvilles, the Miami, wherever your port at, Louisiana's, the Houston's, wherever port you're in, Portland, Washington State, Seattle, you can go from a port container to the local warehouse. You can identify one specific lane, So a specific lane equals actionable opportunity. That's what you're asking for. Okay. So you want to get into the mindset of trying to convert interest into load. So you want to target specific lanes. Now, we'll have to do a search on certain shippers in a certain specific area, what their lanes are, and how we can acquire those lanes. Use the AI technology to your advantage. It's light years ahead of what we used to do in the past, right? Emails and stuff like that. Cold calls are still effective, but leverage their cold calls with the AI technology to kind of streamline your process and create a framework for yourself to get to the customers a little bit faster, right? And that's what we want to try to do. Offer backup positioning. What does that mean? Don't replace, like we just talked about that. Who was that? Jose? Me and Jose was just talking about that. Don't try to replace their main character or main carrier, I should say, not character, carrier. The main truck, because they deal with main trucking companies, right? But every now and then, one of those drivers for that trucking company, they may fall through. Something may happen. Be a backup. Start there. Put your foot in the door there, right? So don't replace the main carrier. You say, I'll be your emergency coverage when capacity tightens or drops or disruptions, right? So that's what that means. When capacity, in other words, trucks, that's what capacity means. Moving shipments from shipper to receiver requires capacity to do that, requires trucks to do that. Capacity, another word for capacity, trucks, okay? This lowers resistance. They're going to resist you less because you're not trying to replace what they already have. You're trying to be a backup for that in case something falls through. Which one sounds better? Which one sounds better? The replacement in case something falls through or replace what they already have?
Replacing it just in case something falls through.
Right. Because you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're just trying to help when that wheel catches a flat. You try to be the spare tire. So that's probably a better analogy too, right? So
Yeah, also you don't want to take on more than you can, you know. I mean, you if you're trying to be the main carrier and they go,
part
hey, they might say, oh yeah, go ahead, and then now
that
you got to deal with more lanes than you can handle.
that part, like my niece used to say, or still says, that part, uncle, that part, what he said, right? So you know how you don't got to say a word. Somebody just made the point for you. Jose just did it. He just made that point. So, and then number three, follow up with value. What does that mean? So this is how you're getting loads now. We're talking about getting loads, right? So what color did I make the other two? Did I make them green or did I make them yellow? I want to stay consistent. Green. Okay. So I made them green. I want to stay consistent with the coloring scheme. So instead of, hey, we're just checking in. See how is everything okay over there? We're just checking in. So instead of that, right? Which sounds what? That sounds generic, sounds bland. It sounds like everybody else. Hey, I'm just checking in. Just checking in. I don't even care about you. Just checking in. Right? Um, say this. Just checking in. Container volumes. Now, again, I'm this is specifically for my area, but you can cater it specifically for yours. Okay, just so you see what it's saying. Just checking in. Container volumes through the Port of Virginia, which is here, I have been tight this week. Have you seen any coverage issues? So you're asking them any questions. Have you had any issues with covering containers this week because it's been a little tight? That's what you, the broker, is asking the shipper, right? So you're not only checking in, but you are inquiring about what's going on in there if there's any coverage issues, right? You see that? You're asking, you're following up. Follow up. So you're following up with value. Not only are you following up, but you're adding value to that. You're saying, hey, I noticed it because you're tracking that. You're trying to get the shipper, so you're seeing the activity of what the shipper does, which is containers in this example, right? So you're monitoring container movement in a specific port, in this case, Port of Virginia. You're saying, yeah, it's been kind of tight this week. I've been noticing that on FreightWaves, Sonar, or Transport Topics, or whatever publication that you use to track the movement of containers through the Port of Virginia. And you say, yeah, it's been kind of tight this week. Has your company seen any coverage issues? Have you had issues covering getting containers out of there? Right? So now you're relevant. You're providing value to see if you can step in and assist. Right? Is this making sense?
Oh yeah, definitely.
So all you gotta do now is take this stuff and just plug in things in your area and go from there, right? Um, Number four, build micro trust. Okay, so let's see what that's about. And this is still under the interest to getting loads, right? You've gotten the shipper through the phone call and the techniques for that. Now you want to get the interest from that into a load. So build. So if they give you one quote opportunity, so if the shipper gives you an opportunity to quote a lane, that's one quote opportunity. They give you a quote. They say, "Hey, here's a lane. Give me a quote. What would you do? What rate would you, or what tender rate would you quote me for this lane?" Right? Treat it like gold. Respond fast, right? Because it's an opportunity. You want to trust it. Micro trust. Professional rate. You got to do your homework. You got to get enough information. Clear communication. In other words, get the details. You need as much details of the load or of the lane in order to give them a professional rate, right? And you want to respond fast to that via email or phone call. Probably email because you want to give yourself a chance to research it, look the lane up on the load board, do your homework, yada, yada, yada. They usually tell you either by close of business today or the next day kind of thing. That's fast enough. Tracking updates, POD immediately paid after delivery. I'm sorry, POD immediately after delivery. I'm sorry. So these are steps and things you would need to do as a broker to build micro trust with the customer. One perfect load, because one perfect load equals more freight, right? One perfect load equals more freight because you did the job correctly by implementing these steps. They say, give me a lane, quote a lane. Here's an opportunity. I'm gonna give you a shot. Jose, what's the name of your brokerage? You have a name for your company yet?
Uh yeah, it's called Iron Ox Logistics.
Iron Ox. Okay, Iron Ox. I'm gonna give you an opportunity to quote a lane. Boom, you're gonna respond quick, either phone call or email. You're gonna do clear communication, asking for the details of the lane. So you would have to understand and know what to ask for. What's the commodity? What's the weight? What equipment type? Uh,
Distance.
where's it picking up? Where's it going to? Well, instead of me telling you, what question should you ask a shipper when they tell you they want you to quote a lane? What are some things you need to extract from the shipper in order to help you come up with a rate?
Yeah, most definitely the commodity. What am I moving? Um, miles, obviously, pickup and delivery dates, times.
Okay, so let's put that all here. So miles, pickup, delivery, dates.
I do remember one thing you
Um,
mentioned, I believe it was on Tuesday. You said also make sure we ask if they have accessorial policy.
Weight, equipment. Did I miss anything here? Is this general? Accessorials, yeah, we'll put accessorials. What am I missing here? If clear communication, this is what you're extracting from the shipper to see that you can give them a quote. You want the miles, pick up delivery dates and times, and if they're appointed, right? Put appointment there. Um, Commodity, weight, equipment, accessorials. Okay. If there's anything else, we'll put it in there. But those are some of the things you were asked. You're going to respond fast with that, right? Um, you're going to provide a professional rate based off of that, right? The clear communication. So I should put a star right here because this is important. You can't do anything else without those. You can't provide a professional rate without clear communicating what you need from the customer, right or wrong, right? Tracking updates. You're going to track updates. You're going to update the shipper with the status of the shipment Basically, that's an update. You're tracking updates. So what is it what does it mean to update the shipper with the status of the shipment? Well, when the carrier gets to the shipper location, what time was that? You let the shipper know either by phone call or email. Um, when the carrier leaves the facility, they're low. Hey, shipper, hey, customer, they're loaded. They're getting ready to head out. They're on their way out. It's 0400 or whatever time it is, right? It's 14:30, 2:30, whatever, right? Update them again when they're in transit, either midway. And you're doing this by letting the carrier know because you, as a broker, you're going to do what's called check calls to the carrier for updates. And if there's any hiccups along the way, any disruptions, remember that word, disruptions, whether it's traffic, in his case, a blowout tire, whatever, right? So that you, the broker, receive that from the carrier so that you can transpose that to the customer to let them know because the customer always wants to be updated about their shipment. That's part of the contract. That's part of them tendering the load to you. Not only are they going to pay you, but they want to be updated about the payment so that they, customer, can update their customer because they're being paid by their customer, the receiver. They bought a truckload of freight from the shipper. The shipper paid you or tendered you, the broker. You, the broker, hired the trucking company to move the shipper's freight, and you took your margin off of that. You see how that works?
Hmm. Yeah.
Interesting, right? That's the process. So here's a shipper. They get a call from a customer. Hey man, you got a truckload of your finished products, your widgets or whatever you make, right? They say, yeah, give me a truckload. Okay, yeah, we're gonna charge you $14,000 for a truckload of 22,000 pounds of fertilizer, whatever, right? Whatever the product is, right? Okay, yeah, we're receiver says we agree to pay you that $12,000. Can you have it to us in a few days? I certainly can. Click and hang up the phone. They get with either a direct trucking company or you, the broker. One way they have to get that shipment to their customer in order to be paid $12,000, right? They decided to hire, or you happen to call them that day. They had a conversation with the receiver customer. The customer did, the shipper did. You called them, started a conversation. They like what you sound like, and you said, okay, I'm going to give you this lane. I just got it from this customer. It's a truckload of fertilizer. It needs to be picked up from our facility and shipped to 2 days out to this location on the East Coast. We're in Indianapolis. It needs to go to upstate New York, Buffalo. Okay. Broker says, okay, I'll take that shipment. They tendered it to you for $3,000. Okay. That's the lowest fair price that the shipper said, okay, we'll tender it. That's a fair rate. We're getting paid 12,000 for it anyway. You don't know that. A broker doesn't know that a shipper is getting paid by a receiver an amount. They don't know that. They're not supposed to know. None of their business, right? But they figure they want to save money. They want to save as much as their $12,000 to ship that truckload of freight to their customer. So they try to, that's why they come to either a direct trucking company or a freight brokerage to get the lowest rate to tender to move that freight from their facility to their customer's facility. You guys understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's the high level of how this works. Okay. Now there's a lot of intermovable parts in that, of course, but that's how it works. Customers dealing with the receiver, they ordered a truckload, they paid for it, they hire either a direct trucking company or a broker. Broker hires a trucking company to move it, make their margin. Everybody's happy. POD sends to the broker, gives to the shipper. They let the receiver know. Receiver pays the shipper. In a nutshell,
Hmm.
class is missed.
When we talk about the information and the clear communication, this is obviously assuming that they haven't sent this information in where they're asking us to quote a lane.
Say that again now. Say it again. I want to make sure people heard it.
Well, I was just asking because you put the clear communication, you put all the things that we're asking them for us to quote the lane correctly, but and give them a professional rate. But this is just saying if they don't give us this information at first. Like we're asking these things like, hey, I don't see this information in, in the tender or whatever it is,
Right.
how they sent it.
You're not gonna get a tender from a shipper yet until you return a quote to them that they asked you to quote for a lane. Once they approve that number, then they'll send you a load tender to sign to either reject or accept with the details of everything that you guys discussed and the details of the particulars of the load. You won't see a tender until that quote is approved. Until the shipper
I
says,
see.
okay, we'll agree with that. Let me send you the tender over now so that you can either accept or reject the tender. Once you accept the tender, now you, the broker, are responsible for moving that freight from shipper to receiver.
Okay, and there's documentation that we sent, like, hey, here, can you fill this out with this information, or how are we
You can
asking
make
for
it
this
look
information?
professional at that, or you can just put it in the form of an email. But you can create yourself a standardized template of what some of the basic questions you would ask a particular shipper in any lane for any equipment type. Make it generic as possible, or you can do it on a case by case basis as you talk to shipper per shipper per shipper in the form of an email. But there, you can create yourself a generic template because most brokers are going to ask most shippers some of the same questions. It gets specific every now and then when there are specialized goods in certain lanes, but some of the most general things you can create a template from for these types of communication questions are you're going to always ask about what the commodity is. You're going to always ask about the miles. You're going to always ask about the date and the time, right? And whether that's appointed or not. First come, first serve. FCFS, first come, first serve. Or do you have to set an appointment? Brokers need to know that because they got to call those facilities and talk to the people, the point of contacts there, and know what the appointed times are so that they can share that with the carriers so that the carriers can show up at the appointed times and not get turned away. So you got to ask those things. You got to ask what the commodity is, what the weight, what the equipment is. So those are standardized questions of any shipper. Doesn't matter. So you can create a generalized template and then create lines under that if you ask extra specific questions as you get more specific with certain shippers. But you can ask generalized questions. These are some of the generalized things you would ask in order to get your quote. Okay.
Okay, good, good. And you obviously will go into how can we rate some of these lanes and how we go about giving that professional rate.
The best way to do it is to compare it with what other brokers are moving it for. So, in that source, it typically is on a load board. You would log into a load board, put a lane in, right? And you'll say, let's say Indianapolis to Atlanta for a drive-in, right? On a certain date is irrelevant. The date it picks up just the lane. We want to know on average what is the spot market rate that every broker on average pays in that lane at this point in this time at this year in this season that's paying, and then that's the spot market rate, which is the average rate that a broker pays to the truck. The spot market rate is the rate a broker pays to the trucking company or the owner operator. You take that number, add your profit margin to that, and then you quote that to the shipper. So if your profit margin is 15% of that, if it's 20% of that, you put that on top of that, whatever that number is, round up. You want to do an example?
Yeah, we can do that.
All right, let's do an example. So is everybody okay with that? We're going to do an example. Everybody else okay with that? Let's do an example. Let me share the screen, and we'll come back to the sheet there, the getting the shipper thing, because I think that's good information. Some of the things we talked about. Let's go to 1, 2, 3 load board. And I'll make up any lane, right? Let's go to 1, 2, 3 load board. Let's just say we'll pick on Terry's area for a minute. So you get a shipper, you have a conversation with the shipper. Shipper has goods that go on a drive van equipment type, a truck, so owner operator, right? And you're the broker. So let's say, yeah, quote this lane, Indianapolis to Atlanta for a drive in. Okay. And as a broker, when you first start your brokerage, you want to determine what your profit margin will be for any shipper on any shipment, whether it's 15%, 10%, 20%. If you're a new broker, you want to be as closer to the lower end as possible. You don't want to try to profit too much when you haven't even learned or earned the ability to do that, right? You're brand new, so you don't, that'll be greedy, right? And uneducated, right? You're not ready for that, right? You haven't move not one load. So why would you margin 20%? I'm just throwing a number out there, right? It could be whatever the number is. So let's just say 10%. Let's use 10% as this example. Now, you can decide as your own freight brokerage what your margin or your profit margin would be for your brokerage. And that's only up to you. I'm just giving you an example. Okay. So we'll go
Okay,
into
that sounds good.
we'll go into new search. We'll say,
Let's do California. Can I see California?
where are you from in California?
I'm in Southern California. Let's do Riverside.
What is it?
Riverside.
Riverside. So we'll say Riverside. We're gonna come out there, Riverside, California. So we'll say produce is good out there, coming out eastbound. So we'll say Riverside within a 100-mile radius, 150-mile, 100-mile radius, or deadhead from Riverside. You understand the concept of radius or deadhead?
Yeah, that means driving
Right.
with no trailer, right? Yeah.
How far empty from a pickup location is your driver willing to drive empty from their 20, their current position, to that location? So most cases it's 0 to 100 miles empty from where they currently are to a pickup in Riverside, California. That's the standard right now, 100 miles. Okay. And then we'll say somewhere we're doing produce. So let's go to uh, let's say New York. Let's go way over there, right? And it's for a reefer because reefer units coming out of California in this season. Right now, actually another 2 weeks is going to be real booming because it's the start, the beginning of March up and through October. It's the beginning of the produce season and the harvest season, right? All the way up, especially down in southern Florida, all the way up to Massachusetts, but also California coming out with produce and fruits and stuff like that, vegetables. So, and over time, you're going to have to learn and understand that and know that. And again, use AI technology to help you, okay? Because they do the work for you. You just have to understand how to use the tools. Let the tools work for you, okay? Reefer. We'll see. Okay, so what I'm doing now is just giving this is a load board, right? It's going to give a spot market rate. In other words, the spot market is what is the average rate that a broker company pays to a trucking company to move in this lane, Riverside, California to New York. I'm gonna say New York City because I just did the state of New York. Um, let's go back and oh yeah, New York, New York. Okay, New York, New York. All right, there we go. So everybody with me so far? So I'm gonna put it in rate in order of highest to lowest numbers posted. Similar loads are a little bit more deadhead, but these common loads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are right here. Riverside, California, literally and within a 100-mile radius. You guys see that what I'm doing with my cursor?
Yeah.
Look at this one. Vernon, California, which is 48 miles from Riverside, not far of a deadhead, going all the way over to Westfield, Massachusetts, which is 113 miles deadhead from New York. Okay. It's paying $9,900, 9,900 for a reefer load, a truckload of freight, truckload, right? 38,000 pounds, 53-foot reefer. Now, that's the rate that the broker, which is Direct Connect Logistics Inc., is this rate column and rate check. The difference between a rate on 1, 2, 3 load board, the difference between the rate column and the rate check column. The rate column is what the broker is posted that load for. Okay. The rate check column is what the average of that rate is or that lane pays on average. So this broker is paying above average. You see that? It's paying some $418 above the average for that lane. So if I was a person, I would go with this one because it's paying more than what the average is. Does that make sense? You guys understand what I just said?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. But at any rate, let's go with the rate. Let's go with the average. Let's not even go with the above average. Let's get what the broker paid. But let's say the rate check, which is the average, 95.18. Okay, that number right there. Keep that in mind. Now, let's say you want to make at least 10% off of every shipment that gets moved, right? As a broker, no matter what the tender is or what the rate is, right? So you're going to put 10% on top of the spot market. So what is 10% of $9,518? You just say 95, say 95.18 times 10%, right? Which is what? $951.80, correct? For all you math geniuses. Somebody give me
Yep. 951 with 80 cents.
yeah, yeah. You just move the decimal place one place over, right? For the see, I didn't go to high school. I went to school high, so I don't know. But anyway, you just say so you add 951.80 to the 95.18, and how much does that equal? Add those two together. 9,518 plus not 10%, 951.80. And what do you get?
10,469 with 80 cents.
The 80 cents. Now you quote that, or I would say round up, maybe 10.5, maybe even 11,000. You want to take a risk and go with 11,000, but I would at least say 10,500. Quote to the shipper, because it still gives you wiggle room to pay the carrier that's still that market average plus your 10% in the tender amount. You see what I just did?
Yeah.
I would round up a little bit more and see if the shipper said, "Well, I can't do 11,000." Well, Key, what about is the rate negotiable? Yeah, yeah, 11,000 too much. What else you had in mind? What about 10.5? I'll knock 500 off of that. Okay, that sounds better. Would you do 10.5? Yeah, I would, because 10.5 still says that I still got my 10% of what the average paid for that lane anyway, right?
So after you receive okay from the shipper, this is where you will go to post that lane or that
So
delivery.
when you say receive an okay for the shipper, let's break that down. So after this conversation, the shipper says, I'll accept 10.5 is a good number. They're going to send you the load tender with the details of the load and the amount that they're going to pay you on the load tender, which is 10 5. So let's go to a load tender. Broker documents and load tender right here. This is what a load tender will have in it, right? It'll have the details of the load, right? It'll say sample load tender, ship it to the broker. Can you guys see my screen? Am I sharing the load tender screen?
Yes.
Okay. So after you get the negotiation, you did your homework, you looked up, you did the quote, and the shipper accepted the quote. Load tender, they'll have a tender number, whatever that number is, right? ABC Manufacturing, whatever the shipper's name is, somewhere in what did we say? We said Riverside coming to New York, right? So Riverside Manufacturing, right? Somewhere in Riverside, California, their address, whatever, right? The broker will be you, what is it? Iron Ox LLC, right? Pickup will be the same as the shipper address because you're picking up from the shipper location. So here will be here. Also, pickup location. The date, whichever you guys agreed to, the time, if there was a time for it, either a time range between 8 and 2, or first come, first serve, or appointment required. They said yes in this case. Is there an appointment required? Yes. So then you would have to call the point of contact at the shipping facility, not necessarily the shipper you spoke to, but the person who's maybe the logistics manager at the shipping bay dock door in that location in the warehouse, and say, hey, we have to schedule an appointment for a pickup at your location for a truckload going to New York from Riverside. I noticed you have pickup times between 8 a.m. and 2. Can we set an appointment for 10 a.m. Pacific time? And they'll say yes or no. Now 10's not good. Let's do 11:30. Okay. Or whatever, right? But you're having a conversation with the point of contact. You, the broker, and that person, that point of contact. And that point of contact, if there's an appointment time, and you have to make sure that this is the case, if there's an appointment time, you have to make sure that their contact information is on the tender, their name, phone number, and email, so that you can contact them. Duh, right? How are you going to contact them and set the appointment date and time if you don't have a contact information to do so? Am I making sense, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's the pickup. This is on the load tender. That's the pickup information. Now you need to know where it's being delivered to. Where it's going. We said somewhere in New York. So let's say Buffalo, whatever, right? So the delivery location, let's say Midwest or East, let's say East. Northeast Distribution Center, because New York, Northeast, that's in the Northeast. So we'll say somewhere in New York, Northeast Distribution Center with a New York address, right? The date that it's going to be delivered there. So from California, which is about 2,800 miles to New York on the load board, right, was about 2,896, so 2,900 miles. So that's going to take about 4 days, right? We'll say five. We'll say a whole week. Let's just say a week. For $9,000, I mean, I'll drive for a week for $9,000. I made 9,000 in a week. Are you crazy? So anyway, so the same thing on the pickup side is the same thing on the delivery side. So the delivery date, obviously 4 or 5 days out, because you pick it up on a certain date, you got to deliver it later on, right? Delivery time, there's an appointment. Their time window at their delivery facility is between 7 a.m. and 3, 0700 to 1500. That's military time, right? So you got to call the point of contact there as the broker. You got to do your job on both sides to make sure that your carrier is updated with that information. This is part of being a broker, okay? You got to make sure that you do your job. You got to call the point of contact at the delivery location. Say, hey, we got uh load number and whatever the load number was up here. If we got a tender number or a load number ABC123 coming from Riverside, California to you on whatever date it was. I noticed you guys have an appointment time. What's convenient for you? We should be there. The driver should be there by 1:12 noon or 1 p.m. local time. When do you want him to deliver? Oh, well, as long as he's here before 3, that's fine. So we do appointment times, but we're usually a 24-hour shipper and receiver. So as long as he gets here within this window, we'll go ahead and pull him off. Okay, cool. That's good. But you have to make that call. You cannot assume what I just said. You can't assume that. You got to make, because on the tender it said there is an appointment required. That's what the shipper got from their customer who paid them $12,000. Said you got to have an appointment on this pickup and an appointment on the delivery. Okay, broker, call the shipper, set the appointment. Call the receiver, set the appointment. Now, if the receiver says otherwise, that's on the receiver, but you did your job. You guys understand?
Yes, sir.
You did your job. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And notate that on the paperwork that what you did. What you call, hey, contacted receiver on this date at this time. Receiver said this. As long as we did deliver there within the window, in case something happens. Because you have a bunch of goofy stuff that goes on, right? Well, he came here at a certain time. We couldn't unload him because he got here at 2:30. We're about to close at 3. Yeah, but you told me when I called you, as long as I'm within that window between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m., I'm good. Now, if my guy get there at 2:30, you saying you can't unload him? You have issues like that sometimes. So you want to make sure that you follow what you're supposed to follow. Because what's that called? If you have a situation, what is that called? If you have something like that, that's called a disruption.
Disruption.
Exactly. That's called a disruption because it's interfering with the flow of that shipment. The shipment is not complete yet, right? You picked it up, you got there, but you're not quite unloaded yet because you ran into this hiccup of the shipper saying that they can't unload you because it's a half an hour prior to them closing. You see? So you got to make sure that you do your diligence on both sides as a freight broker. Okay. And then now in the tender, the details of the load, the commodity, the weight, the pieces, how many pallets, piece count, pallet count, the dimensions. Sometimes they'll put the dimensions in, but you really don't have to because if it's standard pallets, that's 48 by 40s, the standard pallets. Whether it's hazmat or not. This is a reefer load, so it's temperature controlled, but this one is not. This is a dry van. But anyway, what equipment is required? In this case, we said a reefer, but it would say here, it would say a 53-foot reefer or refrigerated trailer, and then any special requirements. Well, it has to be uh, ran continuously, temperature control. That's what a reefer does. It controls the temperature, whether hot or cold. Temperature control. It has to be ran continuous, 34 degrees, while it's being transported from shipper to receiver. While it's in transit, and even when it's stationary, the reefer unit has to still stay on to keep the commodity cool to a certain temperature. Because if it gets there and it's spoiled, guess what's going to happen? Number one, that's a disruption. Number two, that freight might be rejected. Okay? So you have to understand what the special instructions are. And if you don't understand as a freight broker what the special instructions are, guess what you should do? Ask, right? CYA, cover your backside. Ask, okay? And then also in the load tender, it has rate and charges, what they're paying. So the line haul paid, what would we say, 10,005? Or let's say it paid 9,900, and then the fuel surcharge paid the 600, which added up to 10,500. So they gave you a fuel surcharge of $600. They did a $9,900 line haul. Line haul is from pickup to destination. The line haul, you're running that line, that lane. Line haul, it's from pickup to destination. That's the line haul. The fuel surcharge is what they're paying on top of that for the fuel to help mitigate fuel costs. Okay. Accessorials, we talked about that. Well, with a reefer unit, you could have, you definitely will have detention. It depends on if you come into a cold storage facility somewhere in New York, upstate New York, Buffalo. Kind of figure you will. It's cold up there, right? Syracuse and Buffalo. So detention free after 2 hours at $75 an hour. What does that mean? What does that mean? Free after 2 hours at $75 an hour. That don't even make sense. That don't even sound right. Can someone please interpret that for me? I have no idea what that means. I'm a new broker. What does that mean? Detention free after 2 hours at $75 an hour. Someone please interpret that for me.
After 2 hours, there'll be a charge of $75 every hour.
Okay. So what does detention mean?
Detention means it's when they go to a dock and they are there and they can't unload and they're just sitting there, just pretty much wasting time.
There you go.
As soon as they get to the gate, it starts, clock starts.
As soon as you get to the security gate and checks in, the clock starts as
Yes.
opposed to the loading dock. Right. There you go. So this is details on the load tender. And then here's reference number, the reference to load, the pickup number, the load number, pickup number, the reference number, the tender number, all those numbers you need to reference that load at the pickup location to get the right shipment on your trailer, on your carrier's trailer that you're brokering to. And then when your carrier transports it to the delivery location, to reference that so that they can receive it in the proper location. Because they'll stage it at a location in the warehouse and be put up in a certain area, or maybe even cross docket or transloaded and maybe going somewhere else. It just got there to go out to outbound to maybe a local grocery store, right? This is a reefer load. So you never know the situation, right? But as long as you have the right numbers to reference it, you should be straight. And then tender instructions. So the shipper has some tender. Broker must accept or reject the tender by a certain time, date and time. You accept it or reject. And here it is right here. You accept it or reject it. Check, accept or reject. Once accepted, broker is responsible for securing a carrier. Okay, you got to find a carrier. You got to source a truck, find a carrier, provide capacity, right? Tracking the shipment, updates, ELD, not necessarily ELD. You can track through ELD, but check calls, I meant to say, check calls, calling the carrier, tracking it through your broker. You may have broker software integrated into your TMS system. They have that now to track the shipment because it's your shipment now. Even though the carrier technically owns it because it's on their trailer, you are still responsible for it because you are brokering that freight for your customer. That's what the broker shipper agreement is. Okay. You're just using a carrier to do so. Again, the job of a broker. Okay. On time delivery, also on time pickup. But the broker is responsible for, it should say on time pickup and delivery because you got to pick it up on time and deliver it on time, or your carrier, I should say. So, and then POD, now this particular shipment says POD submission within 48 hours, within 2 days. What that means is the proof of delivery that your brokered carrier delivered that reefer freight in Buffalo, New York for you, for your shipper, needs that POD needs to be sent by the carrier, either text, screenshot, or whatever, email, fax, or whatever, to you, the broker, so that you can invoice and send it to your shipper within 2 days, 48 hours, right? And then this is authorized by the shipper. In this case, James Smith, transportation manager at ABC Company, the shipper. This is what a load tender is. Okay. That's a mouthful. Any questions? But this is real world, though, guys. You're going to see this. Some of you already have, right, Mr. Ellis? Real world. But any questions? Good information?
Good information.
Yeah, good stuff. Good
Great,
stuff.
great information.
Okay, let's go back. I'm going to finish up the document that I was at, if I can.
And this document right here on the screen, that's available for us too, like to go back to sit there and look at one like when we need to.
The load tender?
Yeah.
Yeah, right here. If you go under the broker portal, right? In the main menu portal, under
Yeah.
broker documents, this is for those of you who are students who have access because there are going to be some listeners on YouTube and other social media channels listening to this too. But you guys benefit because you literally have access to this stuff. So you go to broker documents, and right here, broker study materials 2026 updated section. It has load tenders, rate confirmations, what to say when calling shippers, earning a shipper, cold call shipper scripts. I'm going to add more stuff to this too. But
Okay.
the load tenders right there. Okay.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
And then here, go back to the here, the two biggest challenges, getting a shipper on the phone and turning trust into a load, or not trust, but turning interest into a load, right? Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. POD after delivery. We just saw that on the other page on the load tender that the shipper requires the broker is responsible for. They want the proof of delivery immediately after delivery. So they say 48 hours. That's a fair amount of time. It shouldn't take a broker 2 days to get a POD from a carrier to a shipper. Now, some carriers try to hijack the PODs because they felt they weren't paid enough on the rate confirmation. Well, if that's the case, carrier, why did you sign the rate confirmation and send it back in to make yourself legally binding to that load instead of trying to negotiate more money? That would be your argument as a broker to the carrier. If you didn't agree with the rate confirmation, why did you sign it and send it in? You're obligated now. So please send the POD over, or I'm going to report you to the authorities, or whatever, hijack load or whatever. So, but that could be a rebuttal. Okay. So that build micro trust. Number 5, I think that's number 5 is it. Then ask after success. Let me highlight that. After delivery, you could ask a question like, would you be open to us handling this lane regularly? Now you're asking about dedicated freight or consistent freight at this point. Most brokers forget to ask that, right? If you do a lane successfully the first time, why would you not ask to try to do it again? How often do you move freight in this lane? How many shipments do you move per week, per month, per day? Would you be open to us handling this lane on a regular basis? You see the work we did. Our carrier picked up on time, delivered on time. There was no OS&Ds, overs, shorts, or damages. no claims filed, no rejection of freight, none of that, no disruptions, right? So how open would you be for us handling this? Let me think about it. Right now, you guys are a backup, but you guys did a good job. So if my other brokers fall off, I may shift you from backup to primary. You may have a shipper say that. Or you may say, yeah, we'll use you as a secondary option. You'll be our consistent secondary option when our carrier falls through. That's a win. It may not be what you want, but it's you got a shipper. Okay.
Quick question about the carriers. Obviously, you have to have some carriers lined up for you, to start accepting some of these lane offers. But what would your recommendation be? Uh, hey, how many carriers should I just have lined up, or should I just use the load board every time?
Well, most carriers, if you're a new broker, the challenge you're going to have is most carriers trusting you because you haven't moved one freight yet, one load yet, and the carrier's factoring companies are probably not going to go with you because you haven't invoiced and generated revenue yet. So, but when you start presenting good paying freight and the carriers see that, they will, some cases, bypass their factoring company and just go with you anyway and get onboarded with you and get set up with you and approved with your brokerage and then build from there. Okay.
So would you say like, hey, really don't start accepting lanes unless you have 5 carriers kind of lined up, ready to go, 10. I'm not sure.
3 would be good to start off with, but get the lanes first. The carriers will follow.
Hmm.
Get the money first. Get the shippers with the tenders first. You're going to get carriers. Whether you're gonna put them at your profit margin or eat into your profit margin and give more of that money to the carrier, somebody's going to take that load. So let's say your profit margin for a lane was $200, and you paid 2,100 for you quoted it for 2,100 to the carrier. They said, "Nah, can I do 22?" So you're taking another 100 from your 200, so you're only gonna make 100 off that load and give that extra 100 to the carrier instead of 21 and 22 for them to move that load. You made $100, not quite $200, but you made $100 off that load. The carrier was satisfied, the shipper was satisfied. They opened up 5 more loads for you because you did what you did. You sacrificed $100 to win more freight from the shipper to make up volume over time.
Hmm.
So sometimes you
Yeah.
have to think like that.
When you said the carriers using their factory company, so it, when it comes to that aspect, so they have their own and I will have my own.
That's correct. And sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. But carriers, before meeting you, the broker, a carrier could have been working with a direct shipper or another broker. But carriers, trucking companies, owner operators, so factory companies' clients are brokers and motor carriers. They do transportation invoice factoring for both brokers and motor carriers. They provide upfront cash flow for both brokers and motor carriers to help them mitigate overhead, mitigate expenses in the beginning until they build up enough revenue where they no longer need the factoring company. But in the meantime, they can leverage that and build up uh, their capital.
Right. So they will just basically receive the money from me as the broker. Or how would on their side the factory company will work? Like what's their
So on their side, the factoring company is going to the carrier's factoring company is going to send you, the broker, a credit application because they want to run a credit check on your brokerage to make sure that there's no red flags on your brokerage as far as
no,
claims, non-payment, things like that, to see how favorable you are and see how much credit line they can extend to you to the carrier through you for factoring. If that works out, then everything opens up. Then you're good with the carrier's factoring company. You may not even have to use your factoring company. The purpose of you using your factoring company as a broker is to get paid from the
from the
shipper,
shipper.
right? Because you can remember the shippers, remember the net terms of the shippers, net 30, net 45, net 60. You, the broker, cannot afford to wait that long because you have to pay the carrier.
Right.
Because remember, the carrier's factoring company is coming to you to get that, whatever your net terms are, to get paid. Well, if you got paid through your factoring company sooner, then they can get their money from you sooner to give it to their carrier.
Okay, so my factoring company will be connecting with theirs so they can get paid after the
Sometimes they do,
delivery.
other times they don't. But your factoring company deals with they'll deal with you to give you upfront capital and then go after the shipper according to their net terms. Now you have your upfront capital on hand. Now the carrier's factoring company, which you onboarded, gives the carrier upfront capital after approving you because of the credit application and the notice of assignment. Now they'll come after you to get that capital that you just got from your side to pay their carrier. And they may not even know of each other, the
Right.
factoring company and the carrier's factoring company. But that's how the process operates.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. Appreciate that.
Okay? Mouthful of information tonight. Hopefully this helps. It was a lot of listening. Hopefully you guys are taking notes too. I may have this in the back office too to help you. How to convert interest into loads, right?
Yeah, all this will be helpful if we can go back and see this right here.
Yeah. Just watch this video, review it. I'm about to get off. Review it. So, and go from there. All right, guys. I'm past my time, but that's fine. If you have, let's see, what is this? Friday. This is Freight Broker, so we'll have our next one. I'm looking at my calendar on the 24th. The next Zoom on the 24th for the broker class, but obviously go through your. I'm going to be going through the quizzes and making them a little bit more challenging for you guys, even though this is still a beginner's course. I'm going to ask questions a little bit more challenging to kind of get you to think more and do your research more and apply in the course what you're going to eventually apply in real world when you start actually brokering. So I think that's probably a better methodology that I should implement to kind of help you guys progress as brokers. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Charles.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend. And for those of you with loved ones, have a happy
Sound great.
Valentine's Day. And take care.
You too also.